It's not something to take lightly, no doubt. At some point, you just have to make the leap. You can get a certain baseline of education, you can network with a few people, you can get tied in, you can feel like you have a community support system, but you're not really going to get street smart until you get out there and start doing stuff, right? Book smart is one thing, but it all goes out the window when you know what hits the fan. So I would just say get out there and get to work.
Welcome, everyone, to the Road Less Travel Show. This is a show about people that were successful in a previous career and left that career to go down a different path. I'm your co-host, Richard Coyne.
And our co-host, Bill Zahller.
On today's show, we're so pleased to have Paul Shannon with us. Paul, welcome.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you having me today.
Absolutely, Paul. Well, thank you again for being on the Road Less Traveled show. To start with, can you tell our listeners a little about your background, what line of work you initially started in, and how long you're in that line of work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a sales background. Spent 15 years in corporate America. For the last decade of that, I was in medical device and capital equipment sales. I was selling the implants that are used in cataract surgery, along with the capital equipment that kind of powers the removal of the eye's natural lens, all the restorative materials. So I was in the operating room, working with surgeons to implement these technologies and provide insights during cases, training nursing staffs, working with hospital administrations to implement these technologies. Was on the road quite a bit towards the back end of that stint. I was more of a regional rep at that point, more of a consultant in implementing these technologies, whereas initially I was sort of a local rep with a smaller geography. So towards the end, it got to be a lot of travel, a lot of hours, about 80 hours a week, 80 nights in hotels a year. So that's part of the reason why I had to make a transition.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, we got another friend here locally that was in the medical device business too. And the same reason he transitioned out was just the unending, basically on call and schedule and travel and kind of no control of your time anymore. So Paul, what branch did you go into? What have you segued into as far as career-wise now?
So I was attracted to real estate just because of the flexibility and schedules. My kids were young at the point when I left my career in 2019. I think they were 5 or 6 and 4 at that time. Today I've got a 10, 8, and 4-year-old. So I kind of realized that, with the path that I was on, I wasn't necessarily enamored with my boss's lifestyle and what they had going on with their families. I didn't want their jobs anymore. Whereas prior to that in my career, I kind of wanted to advance up the corporate ladder.
Right.
So that was a problem. And then, I just didn't see that my values were really aligning with what my career was all about. I just didn't want to be gone that often. I wanted to be a part of my kids' lives. I wanted to coach their sports. I wanted to be there for them in the morning when they got on the school bus. So none of those things were going to happen when I was leaving the house at 6:30 a.m. a lot of mornings, or in hotels a lot, not home for 3-4 days at a time, gone on the weekends occasionally for trade shows, etc. So I knew that I had to make a move. And real estate, I just thought, offered a lot of opportunity as far as an entrepreneurial endeavor, but a way to create passive income and kind of branch away from being dependent on an employer and an employer's income. So I started slow. I started buying single family homes and, had some success there. And, once I tasted the success, I kind of took that leap. And since then, transitioned into multifamily, took on a few larger properties. We've transacted on close to 200 residential units at this point. And then most recently, in the last few months, partnered with a large club, an investing club called the Left Field Investors, to create a fund called InvestWise Collective, which will be an interesting endeavor where we're kind of allowing investors to customize the positions that we take on within the fund and choose kind of an a la carte approach to what they want to invest in. But this will be across the realm of commercial real estate assets, both debt and equity. I have a passive investing background as well. I'm in 14 positions actively and have had 6 go full cycle. So have some experience on that side as well. So that's kind of the maturation process and how things have evolved. I certainly didn't expect that rolling out that way when I left my career in 19. I kind of thought I would start a property management company and be a home flipper. So it's amazing, you put one foot in front of the other and you kind of network and you find a different path than you may have thought when you first planned things. So.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, actually, Jim Pfeiffer was on our show before, way back, some time ago. So yeah,
excellent. Good friend of mine.
Yeah. So we and actually dig in just comparing notes. early in my career, I was a traveling consultant, and sometimes early things changed. After a time where you could be home a little more reasonable travel. But at the beginning of my career, sometimes I was going out Sunday night, come back Friday night, which is ridiculous. For when you have a family. Fortunately, it iterated and evolved to more of Monday morning, first flight, kind of late, last flight Thursday night, typically. Occasionally I had a local project, but then my career changed to more of a management role where I was really running the sales and actually was able to do a lot more control of my schedule and wasn't out every night. But anyway, similar stories. It's definitely you do what you got to do, but sometimes you make a choice and you're able to make a choice, and that's nice that you did. So Paul, back to your maybe some of your surgeries or maybe some of your days as that in your prior field. Is there a funny story you can share? Something happened to you?
Yeah, I don't know how funny it really is, but it's laughable to me now. And it's a story of kind of being unprepared and what that can lead to. So I was in the operating room about 2.5 hours north of where I live early in the morning. I think I'd stayed the night. Didn't get a good night's sleep, was a little bit groggy. Went in, first surgery, I think started around 7 a.m. And we got through, 4 or 5 cases. These cataract cases typically take, 15 minutes or so, and then you're rolling over to the next patient. So we're in the operating room, maybe the 5th case of the day, building some rapport with the surgeon and the staff. And this was relatively early in my endeavors with this particular machine that we had recently launched. And I had been trained on it and certainly knew the typical, I guess, rollout of what would happen during a case and how to handle the scenarios that would potentially be needed to have me give advice on. But midway through the case, things didn't go as planned, and the surgeon had to do what was called a vitrectomy. And this is when the eye's natural lens, which is being removed, that's where the cataract is. It sits in what's called the capsular bag. Think of like an M&M, and the capsular bag is the shell of the M&M, and inside is the chocolate. That's the capsular bag. So you want to remove just a layer of the outer skin of that M&M, and then remove the chocolate, and then put an implant in. Well, if you break the back of the M&M, the capsular bag, then there's fluid in the back of the eye that starts to leak to the front of the eye, and it causes blindness. So in the middle of the cataract case, you have to transition to, a different protocol essentially, and transition the machine to be able to handle a vitrectomy to save basically the eye from the patient, for the patient. So this situation happens. It's pitch black in the operating room, except for the microscope light that's shining bright right over the patient's face. And surgeon says XYZ. He's talking to his staff. I realize something's going wrong, and then he says, "Paul, we need a vitrectomy. How do we set up the Centurion here?" And I was like, So I look at the machine and I'm like, I know I've been trained on that. It's been a long time. It's a very rare situation. Typically this doesn't happen. Played around for 10 seconds or so, and then admitted that I didn't know. So I stepped out into the hallway. I called a couple of, my mentors within the business, finally got one on the line. They shared with me, step 1 through 10 on how to get the machine ready. It took, 10 times longer than it should to get it rolling. Thankfully, the outcome for the patient was salvaged and everything worked out, just fine. But certainly, I had, like I said, a decent rapport with the surgeon, and things ended up being okay long term. But I think that definitely tarnished, my reputation or my goodwill that I had with everybody in that room. So, it really taught me that, being the weak link is not where I want to be. Being unprepared is not where I want to be. So I never wanted to let a situation like that happen again in my career. So I try to break things down on really a micro level and see, hope for the best, but plan for the worst. And kind of, dissect all those different scenarios and visualize literally what I will do in those cases. And I think by doing that, it's really sort of provided me a buffer for, when issues come up or mistakes happen, there's a plan B or there's a plan C, and there's a way to kind of address that situation without being, put in a tough spot like that. So not necessarily a funny story, but just a story of, lesson learned, and always good to be prepared in all cases.
Yeah, that's a great lesson, and definitely, like you said, it's very fortunate that the outcome was a good one, both for the patient and ultimately, like you said, with your relationship with the surgeon, and then the other folks in the room. Yeah, definitely. I'm with you. You never want to be that in that situation where you're the cause of something bad happening, or you can't recover because okay, but maybe it's 1 in 1 million, but at the same point in time, you still have to be prepared for that. So yeah, good lesson. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Failure to plan is planning to fail, right? So never want to be there
Right,
again.
right.
Question, Paul. So what was one of the deciding factors in having you leave your medical device sales job? Basically, had I know you mentioned time was one of them, that you want to more control of your time. So kind of maybe go through some of the transition. You said you started buying single family homes. Were you doing that while you were still employed? And then at what point you realized, all right, this makes sense to go full time in this endeavor?
Sure. Yeah. I bought a duplex in 2016, kind of learned the ropes on how to deal with an older home and all the issues that are there. So got some, education on maintenance issues and dealing with contractors, both good and bad, dealing with tenants, being fair, having empathy, being a property manager and kind of starting that path. I bought a couple of other houses at auction after that. And I was implementing the BRRRR strategy. So I was, buying, renovating, renting it out, refinancing, and repeating. I had a finite amount of capital. At that time, I wasn't raising money. I wasn't borrowing private money. I was using my own funds. I was borrowing out of a HELOC, or I was using my funds out of my brokerage account. So I kind of looked at that as a pool of my portfolio that I planned to kind of continuously roll over. And I was successful in doing that on a couple homes. One where I had the opportunity to take out a fair bit more than I had actually put in on the property. So I think we bought it at like 55,000. I put like 40,000 into it, and it appraised for 145,000. So even at like an 80% loan to value, I was able to take out like 20 grand extra if I wanted to. And I didn't necessarily do that. That wasn't my plan. But tasting that success really kind of catapulted me a little bit and made it that a realization that I wasn't just book smart. I had some street smarts. This was achievable. This was something I could do. I kind of believed in myself and got that confidence level up. So it was shortly thereafter. I think I bought one or two more houses. It was on my fifth one where I just decided to pull the trigger. I had the support of my wife. She said, you're happy doing this. The only thing really holding you back from scaling up is your time and your commitment to your current job. And, let's just give this a run. Like this could be something big for you, and it could change our lives entirely. And I basically gave myself a 2-year runway and left corporate work at that point and said, if this doesn't work out, whether it's macro or it's myself, or I don't like what I'm doing, or I'm not able to do it for whatever reason, and I fail, multiple times over and over again, I can always go back. I always have that career to fall back on, and had a successful endeavor there and a good relationship with management, et cetera. And, thought that maybe I could get in through another company. So I thought the biggest risk at that point was not taking a chance on myself. And that's when I kind of changed my focus entirely. So like I said, left in 2019, we bought, I think 23 houses that year. And we were renovating like crazy. We had a couple construction teams. I ended up meeting a property manager who's now my partner today on some projects. He manages over 1,000 units. So his core competency is actually dealing with the tenants, lease up, doing turnovers, et cetera, which I come to find out is not mine. And I don't really enjoy doing it all. I enjoy dealing with people. I enjoy the capital side. I enjoy the operations side. So it was kind of just like I said at the beginning of the podcast, putting one foot in front of the other and finding my way. I started to see the forest through the trees and realized that I really liked operating property. Obviously, we've had some changes in the macro environment with interest rates rising so quickly. We started underwriting to agency debt and decided not to go the bridge route and get short-term floating rates. When we saw that inflation was at 9% and the federal funds rate was at 0, we assumed that Jerome Powell was pretty serious about getting a handle on inflation, particularly since one of his idols was Paul Volcker. So, right. And if you know the story of Paul Volcker, he broke the back of inflation in the 80s. So I just assumed that, he wanted to leave the same legacy of handling it. He was already wrong about the transitory argument, and inflation was becoming more structural. So we really didn't want to be in a scenario where we were in a bridge loan, where we had a short-term horizon to, really fix up these properties and get them refinanced at who knows what rate. There could be expanding cap rates at that point. There had been so much cap rate compression. So we penciled a lot of deals, and, we put in LOIs, and we were usually about 80-85% of guidance because we were using lower leverage on our assumptions. And, we didn't win any. That's the the crummy outcome is we didn't scale as fast as we wanted to in 2022. But we looked at a heck of a lot of deals, and that kind of led, as I was passively investing in other opportunities, alternatives in commercial real estate, that kind of led to the partnership with Left Field Investors. I'd already had a previous relationship with them and just saw there was more upside, I felt, in other asset classes. And, my skill set in dealing with people and investors and just, being kind of a sales background, but having this sort of operational experience that I had up until that point, I felt like there was a really good story to tell there. And that brings us up to today.
Nice. Paul, maybe as you were kind of making the shift going from, you said you've been doing a lot of passive investing in other deals, as well as, buying your own single families, where maybe when you were shifting into the multifamily, you mentioned obviously losing a lot of deals because of just not, the sellers weren't willing to sell at the price you were willing to offer, which, we're seeing, of course, all the time as well. Mm-hmm. Were there some other obstacles you can mention?
Building a team is difficult, I would say, and trying to source deals that, have a decent basis on the going in is also a task, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of deals that go to market that are on a flashy OM that hit everybody's inbox, it's hard to compete on those deals. That just right. There's too many eyes on it. So you really have to have relationships and build, a network of back channels, or have that broker that gives you first look, or have, a direct to seller sort of approach. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that takes a ton of time and, a lot of networking and a lot of processes, right? So we tried a few things and we stumbled, and, we've tried, cold calling owners and sending direct mail and all those types of things. And they've been successful to some degree, but on a bigger scale where we're trying to scale to the level we were, not really. So, that was a difficult thing. Finding quality property management is a difficult thing. I mentioned that my partner is a property manager, and he's in a town that we operate in. It's a tertiary market about 3 hours from Indianapolis. But, here in Indianapolis, with some of the mid-sized properties that we were dealing with, the property management is less professional. It's challenging to run a property when you don't have on-site management, when you don't have maintenance, when you don't have any oversight. Right. So you become the person that needs to be the overseer. And then that means you're on the horn and you're constantly, trying to tackle these problems. Whereas if you're operating a 150 unit apartment complex, you've got economies of scale, you've got staff on site. They are there day to day, so they see a lot of these issues, and that's their full-time job, is to make sure that property is manicured and operating efficiently. So, that's where we wanted to go in 2022 when we started striking out, because of our underwriting criteria. So I'd say those were both significant challenges, along with the macro and just our kind of conservative nature and not wanting to bite off more than we could chew. But that's just, I think everybody goes through that as they're growing, and, they run into challenges, and it's about how you deal with those challenges and those failures and getting back up off the mat.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as disappointing as not getting the deal flow or ones under contract as you'd hope for, it's, at the end of the day, it's better not to get a bad one under contract, right? You don't want to overpay for it, and then you'll have all the issues downstream. So, in hindsight, I'm sure it's a blessing. And like I said, it's a learning. You're building still rapport with the brokers. You're still, seeing more of the market and underwriting more properties. So it builds, it's not wasted time. It's just, it's a little frustrating as you're trying to scale. But
no, and I think that's a great point. You're starting to see a lot of, those that maybe overextended have to deal with some of the issues now down the road, right? So you're seeing distributions paused or capital calls, or, even worst case scenarios than that, where deals may be taken back. I think that stuff is still going to unfold. And that was a big reason in why I wanted to transition towards working with the Left Field Investors Group and create this fund, InvestWise Collective, because we really wanted to take the approach of aligning interests with limited partners better. We didn't like what we were seeing from, a lot of people that just focus more on marketing and acquisitions than actually operating property and being fiduciaries of capital. So we wanted to kind of provide education to limited partners and try to, we're investing in these deals ourselves within the fund. So we're 3 guys as the management team that are looking to place capital, and we give the investor the 4th right of refusal. If they don't want to join us, that's fine. But here's why we as the management team like this deal. Here's how we vetted the operator. Here's the due diligence that we've done at a very high level from a limited partner standpoint. We want to kind of create that avenue for limited partners to feel confident in the investments that they get into. Whereas I think their confidence has been broken a little bit by some of the activities and some of the investments they've got in over the last couple of years.
Yep, absolutely. What was maybe as you transition from the flipping houses, like had quite a bit of success in the BRRRR strategy and the number of ones you were able to flip. But as you transition into the multifamily side, what was can you look back one of your first victories in that?
Yeah. So we bought a 40-unit apartment complex. My wife and I had used some of the capital that we had generated from flipping houses, and we sold some of our rental portfolio, the single family portfolio, during the beginning stages of COVID. So this is back in 2020. We acquired this property. It was 70% occupied. It had, vintage units from the 1970s. It had old cast iron plumbing, roofing problems, drainage issues in the courtyard. Parking lot was all tore up. Some troubled tenants, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a big property for us to tackle. Before that, I think we had bought an 8-unit. That was our biggest property we had bought. So jump into a 40-unit from an 8-unit, it's a bit of a different story. Had a good relationship with the property manager at that time. It had a little bit of a track record. We had done maybe 10 rehabs with his crews or my crews, and he had managed my properties. So we hired him to do all the interiors, and then I hired all the subs to do all the exterior work and some of the bigger jobs where I wanted to bid out, make sure we were getting competitive pricing. So negotiated with the seller directly, kind of got wind of them through a network channel, and it took us 3 months to come to a deal. But she was in a bit of a distressed situation and needed to get out. So I felt like I got in at a good basis that was still fair to what she had put into it. Mm-hmm. And it cash flowed day one, even at 70% occupied, but there was so much upside. So we went in and we renovated 20 of the units. We put in all new PVC plumbing in the sewer lines. We fixed the drainage issues, put new gutters on, new roofs, restriped and surfaced the parking lot, cleaned up the tenant base, et cetera, et cetera. We used a local credit union to finance the deal. It was a 10-year fixed rate note with no prepayment penalty. And within, I think, 13 or 14 months, we refinanced that property. We locked it in at a 10-year, 4.15% loan. Nice. It's at 72.5 or 72.5% LTV at that point. I think that was low. It's probably about that now, because I think cap rates have decompressed a little bit and the property's probably lost a little bit of value from its peak. But I was able to get all of our capital out that we put in. We financed all the CapEx. We put the down payment down. We were 80% loan to value on the front end. And like I said, we refinanced it 72.5 at that point. But we got all of our money out, and it still cash flows a significant amount a year. It's the best asset we own from a cash flow standpoint, and probably the best investment we've ever made. So again, we did another one like that in Indianapolis that we're about to put on the market. I did that with another partner. That's also 40 units. So just kind of getting that success and taking baby steps as you go up the ladder, I guess, is what I would recommend anyone that's getting started. You don't have to bite off something huge. You can kind of, for me, it's always been, fundamental to kind of learn the process and have like that rite of passage and feel like I'm ready to take that next step, than just to take massive action, if you will, and go out there and try to, hit the home run right out of the gates. I think learning each step of the process too is helpful when you start to delegate and you try to create processes, because you can then help manage the manager. It helps you feel confident that you can delegate and you know how to step in if those things don't go right. Whereas if you just hire a property manager and you've never managed anything yourself, like how do you know what's actually happening and how they run their business? So you don't have to be 100% proficient or an expert necessarily, but just to have some experience in it, I think helps a lot. So to answer your question, Bill, that was the one that kind of catapulted the interest in multifamily and growing larger.
Wow, that's a great story, great success. Nicely done. Yeah. So, Paul, more recently, is there a funny story you can share?
As it relates to real estate?
Sure. Perhaps as you're doing the fund, or maybe in a multifamily situation, something that, recently you came across that struck you as funny.
Well, I'm going to take it way back to like when I first got started. It was even before I left my W-2 job. at that point, like I mentioned, I was working a ton of hours, and I'm trying to, manage these rehabs at the same time and learn property management, and et cetera, et cetera. So I was really burning the candle at both ends. And we had a rehab going on over at a house that was starting to kind of fall apart. The wheels were coming off a bit, and we were behind schedule. It was supposed to be done. This GC said 6 weeks. We're at week 9. It seemed to me like there was no end in sight. At that point, this is, I think, my second or third house. I'm paying this guy by the hour, which wasn't a good decision. I wasn't structuring my contracts the way I probably should have been at that point. Lesson learned. He's over there, whenever he feels like it, but he's probably billing me even when he's not. So we meet over there. We have a kind of a tough conversation, and he says, "Yeah, I'm going to get this done for you. Give me 2 weeks. Here's what I'm going to get done this week. Tomorrow I'm going to do." We broke it down to a micro level. I had like him on like a daily schedule of what was going to get done all the way through. So the next night, it's after hours. It's past my kid's bedtime. It's dark out, and I decided to just take a ride over there and see what's going on and make sure that he's checked all the boxes for what we talked about the day before. So I get there at 8:30 at night, and I hear loud music, and all the lights are on, and there's like 12 cars in the parking lot or out on the street, and I'm like, what the hell is going on over here? So I get out of the car, I walk around, I hear these guys yelling at each other, and there's girls laughing on the inside. I'm like, they're having a party in my house. This is unbelievable. You got to be kidding me. So call the cops, because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to walk into in there. I don't necessarily want to get into a confrontation. So police come over. I wait there outside. They go in, they clear the place out. Obviously, I got to fire this guy at that point. So I call him up the next day. I said, "Man, I don't know what the hell you're thinking, but this is not going to fly. Like this is over." So he didn't come back. He left some tools over there. It took me another 2 or 3 weeks to find somebody that could finish the job. I was over there, nights and weekends doing paint and, getting my hands dirty and really, trying to wrap it up, because I wanted to get my money back out and roll on to the next one. So, that was kind of a learning experience all the way around. You got to build trust with your vendors and those that you work with. You got to structure contracts proficiently and have accountability. And having a team means so much. You can't do everything yourself, so you got to rely on people. And obviously I couldn't rely on this person, but that's one of those Burr deals that turned out where I could, actually take out more capital than 80% loan to value when I refinanced it. So it kind of came out smelling like roses. Probably got a little bit of luck there with the timing of the market and whatnot. But that's a story that sticks with me, where I always want to CYA, if you know what I mean, from now on, and make sure that I've got things buttoned up on the front end so I don't run into situations like that. And thankfully, I haven't had any other stories like that. But when you're dealing with people, when you're dealing with real estate and tenants and contractors, there's a ton of other stories, man. I mean, there's just this stuff comes up. It's life. You're dealing with people's lives, so you run into some crazy stuff out there. That's for sure.
Yeah, and a lot of them we can't talk about here because they're so bad you can't make it up. It's just But yeah,
that's right. That's exactly right.
Oh man.
Well, in the contractor's defense, he did say he'd spend more time at your property. He just didn't say how he's going to use that time.
I should have clarified that better, Billy. That's right. That's probably my fault.
Well, Paul, like I said, you've gone through kind of iterations of the flipping, doing the 8-plex, the 40, couple 40s, and then partnering with left field investment. So where are you kind of today in your journey, and where are you envisioning going?
Yeah, I mean, right now, Bill, I'm really focused on this fund. I'm having a lot of fun with it. It's it's exciting, the opportunities that we're being exposed to, and feel as though we can bring real value to the investor base, both the left field investors as well as the investors that I've worked with in the past now. And we really want to kind of grow that into something big. So we're being patient. We're only trying to bring 4 to 6 deals into the fund per year. It's not going to be massively profitable on the front end at all. It's really performance based as far as our compensation goes as fund managers. So that's a challenge for us to bring quality deals and have them perform and have our investors be happy, and hopefully there's some longevity to it. So I think that's exciting right now. I truly do enjoy operating multifamily as well, and I haven't lost sight of that. I think there will be an opportunity to get back in the game at some point. I've been sitting on the sidelines since 2022. We're in the middle of trying to sell an asset right now, so that's that's part of the business that's active. But as far as acquisitions go, in my market, I feel like it's really important to have boots on the ground. Like I'm, hyper focused locally. So I want to stay within my geographic sphere as it relates to actively operating real estate. And in my market right now, I feel like the bid and the ask are still a little bit stretched, and there's some room for those things to come together. I think that buyers will eventually win out. So I'm kind of waiting for sunnier days as it relates to that. And the fund just keep me busy in the meantime, and may be the opportunity that I run with for the long term, and just keep my current portfolio that I have with multifamily. And so I'm kind of leaving the door open, I guess, with that question. That's pretty broad, but I've found too that since I've left my career in 2019, there's been like 3 or 4 pivots that I've made just in like 4 or 5 years. I mean, what we're doing from an entrepreneurial perspective is investing. And investing, although it's not necessarily about timing the market, there are certainly different theses that evolve or unroll as time goes on, and there's opportunities that come up that weren't there before. You think about today, like if we're really kind of bullish on moving down the capital stack in our fund. You can get equity-like returns at the bottom of the capital stack and take a lot less risk, have collateral in the real estate itself. You couldn't say that, 2 years ago. There really wasn't an opportunity. I think there's the same kind of thing going on. I read an article in Market Watch last night. Howard Marks, the founder of Oaktree, huge private equity firm. He mentioned that corporate bonds right now are much more attractive than equities for the same companies. There's a lot less risk, and there's more guaranteed payouts, even though those payouts are slightly lower than what you might get on a risk-adjusted basis. They're very attractive. And I think that same kind of dynamic is working within real estate debt or mezzanine debt, or I should say senior loans or mezzanine debt or preferred equity. So, like I said, those opportunities weren't there a couple of years ago. So I think for me, like being nimble and being able to pivot, I know there's the anti-argument to that is that you want to be hyper focused and you want to really be niche down, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I've found that when I've done that, like that doesn't work necessarily for me. So I like kind of having a broad perspective and just, being open to new avenues and doing a lot of networking and finding my path as I go along. So we'll see what happens down the road from here.
Nice. Paul, as you look at how you've iterated and pivoted yourself, perhaps personally or through your companies, is there anything that you can talk about you do to give back and help others in some way?
Sure. Yeah. Like I've mentioned a couple of times on the show, networking is so critical in this business, right? It's a people business, and if you try to do it alone in a silo, you're not going to have success. So one of the avenues that I've used to grow my network is social media and LinkedIn specifically. And I've had, some great interactions with people. I met a ton of awesome individuals. I've actually partnered with people that I've met through that platform. Nice. But in growing that platform, I found that there was an opportunity to kind of, give back, as you would call it. And, last year we did it. No, it was the beginning of this year, actually. It was in the winter. Beginning of January, I ran a half marathon, and I coupled that up with raising money for St. Jude's Hospital. Nice. So the story behind it was, hey, I'm training, I'm busting my butt. I want to get out there and raise money. Support me in this endeavor to give back to the community, but also to get my butt in shape. And it resonated pretty well, I guess. And we raised almost $10,000 for St. Jude's at the beginning of the year. So was really successful there. I felt like it was a positive impact. And although that's not, a significant sum of money when it comes to, all the issues that are out there and children dealing with cancer and what their families are going through, et cetera, it's certainly more than I could give myself, right. So was pleasantly surprised there, and would like to do something similar every year if we can, whether nice. It's through getting back out there in the cold and running, or doing something else to kind of inspire people to want to donate and give back.
Very nice.
Yeah, that's great worthy cause, and like I said, it sounded like you had a good success at that. So yeah, congratulations on that side, Paul. And I guess, is there something you've implemented recently? I know you mentioned networking a few times as one of the core aspects to helping you grow your business. Is there anything else you can think of that has been beneficial helping you scale?
Yeah, and I'd say it's almost completely unrelated to business, but it does tie back in my life so many times and so much. When you get really busy, you got kids, you got activities, sports outside of work, and then you've got multiple businesses that you're kind of working on, as I've talked about, and pivoting and getting involved in so many things, time becomes sort of sparse. And I don't mind that. I don't mind working hard when I'm doing something that I'm working towards that I enjoy doing. So I'm happy to do it. But what I found is that, getting exercise, working out, taking care of my body, taking care of my mind and my health, would fall sort of like fifth on the priority list. And when I let that happen, I would really get out of whack, with the rest of my day, and it would affect me mentally. It would affect my clarity. It would affect my enthusiasm towards everything that I was doing. So it took me a while to realize that. And it's sort of obvious when you read books and they talk about the importance of health and exercise and all this other stuff. So I just kind of changed my routine and made that the first thing that I did in the morning. I get up a little bit earlier. I'm getting a little older now, so I don't hit it as hard as I used to, but get to the gym a few times a week and lift weights, or, go out for a run, or just do yoga or meditate or something. But once I get into that state and I kind of get that out of my system, I can just focus so much more on what's ahead of me towards the day. And it's not a distraction to think about, well, when am I going to get this workout in? Or it's 9 o'clock at night, and man, I didn't get that workout in. I'm bummed, and, wake up feeling like a pile the next morning. So, that's been important to me, to kind of just focus on me a little bit more, and, make sure that I'm taking care of myself so I can take care of other people too.
Great advice. Yeah, definitely. Taking care of yourself physically to help keep those juices going, as well as, just make yourself feel better all around is a great approach. So, Paul, what advice would you give somebody who's considering making a path change?
Career path changes are difficult, right? It's like, if you got the bird in the hand, you don't have necessarily the experience, the confidence, the network, the certainty, right? And if you've got a family, it makes it even harder, because you've got income coming in, and you've got to maybe pay for a mortgage or save for kids' college, or whatever it is. So it's not something to take lightly, no doubt. I think you need to educate and read books, listen to podcasts like this one, talk to mentors locally in your area, ideally, whatever it is you're interested in, whether it's real estate or something else. Try to meet other people that are in your position or where you want to be, let's say in 2 or 5 or 10 years, and kind of like, visualize how you can backtrack from where they are to get to where they are, right? Reverse engineer the process to get there. And that's also not easy to do. So at some point, you just have to make the leap. And that's the advice part, is like, you can get a certain baseline of education. You can network with a few people. You can get tied in. You can feel like you have a community support system. But you're not really going to get street smart until you get out there and start doing stuff, right? Book smart is one thing, but it all goes out the window when what hits the fan. So you've got to kind of get those experiences. And the only way to do that is just to get started. So at some point, you have to get off the sidelines and get going. That was a mistake that I made. I wanted to get into real estate probably back in 2010. And if I did, man, were there some deals out there to find, right? People that got in earlier really made out well. I waited until 2016 to get off my butt, because I just was, like I said, I had the bird in the hand. I didn't take action. I thought something was just going to fall into my lap, maybe. I'm not sure what I was thinking, honestly. But once I did start to take action and have some success, the confidence grew, and everything kind of built on itself. So I would just say, get out there and get to work.
Yeah, great advice. We talk about that quite frequently. We're just, again, learning, figuring out and taking lessons from other people. That's all great. It's all important. It's all valuable. But at some point in time, if you don't actually take action yourself, you're not going to really kind of get in there and really figure out how the real world goes, and as far as what you're trying to do. You got to be in the game and again, prepare. Absolutely. But at some point in time, you got to take action. So,
yeah. And I'd add to it, like, you got to tell everybody what you're trying to accomplish, because you never know where there might be a link with somebody that resonates, and they can introduce you to somebody else. I know maybe you can't, necessarily blast that out all over the radar with your employer, but outside of your employer, your local network, your community, your church, your kids' sporting events, like, those are opportunities to network with people and say, hey, do you know anybody? Or, hey, here's what I'm trying to do. You got to work it into conversations sort of tactfully. But that's also an avenue you can take to kind of accelerate your growth.
Yeah. Yep.
Absolutely. Well, Paul, what's the best way for our listeners to reach out and find out more what you have going on?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Bill. Thank you guys both for having me on today. It's been a great conversation and I've enjoyed it. Um, there's a couple ways to get in touch with me. First, the fund's website is investwisecollective.com. If you go on there, you can get on our distribution list and see of our upcoming opportunities. My apartment business is redhawkinvesting.com, another website there. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so I'd love to network there. So if you'd like to connect with me, that's probably the best place.
Great. And we'll add links to the show notes below to make that easier for listeners. Well, Paul, we really want to thank you for being on the Road Less Traveled show today. Really enjoyed the conversation and wish you continued success.
Thanks. Likewise, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, Paul, definitely thank you for being on. We really appreciate it. We also want to thank our listeners. Please continue to give us a 5-star rating so we can bring you more great content like our show today with Paul Shannon. And we want to remind everybody of a couple of things that Park Capital Partners has going. First, we have the Park Capital Partners Value Add Fund, which is a 506c fund open today to accredited investors. Second, we have the Park Capital Partners Foundation, which is a 501(c) nonprofit that Bill and I created as another way that we give back. The way that works quickly is first, we fund the operations of that foundation, so all the money donated goes to do its best work, which is to help others. Second, we donate personally. Third, we donate corporately. And finally, when investors invest with us in one of our projects, we make a donation to honor that investor to a pre-selected list of 15 different charities, including St. Jude's Hospital. So please, folks, reach out. Bill and I are happy to have a conversation anytime. ParkCapitalPartnersLLC.com, ParkCapitalPartnersLLC.com. And remember, folks, the road less traveled may be calling you. We recommend that you listen and take action. Thanks for joining.